I think it's a truly unique situation here in New Mexico that both our past senator and our current senior senator are world leaders in energy and in energy policy. But before the senator gets up to speak, we have actually two people. The senator is such a big guest, it's going to take two people to introduce him. And those two people are one person who is extremely important to me. That's my boss, Dan Lopez, president of New Mexico Tech. And he will be joined up at the podium by Lieutenant Governor Diane Dennish.
I have an introduction here for Senator Bingaman, but I'm just going to substitute the names because there was just kidding.
That's okay. You can do mine.
First of all, let me thank each and every one of you for being here. I think this is a great opportunity to discuss issues of national importance, actually global importance. But with that, I have the distinct pleasure of introducing a friend of mine, the Lieutenant Governor of the state of New Mexico. She is a formidable leader in the state of New Mexico. She has taken it upon herself to reach out to the various communities around the state. She was recently in Socorro to present the stimulus package in a very concise, understandable way. I think that's one of the marks of this individual that I admire so much, that she simply knows how to reach out to people and do the things that government is supposed to do, and that is to bring support, provide vision and ideas to move forward. And I am so pleased to count her amongst my very, very dear friends. With that, help me welcome the Lieutenant Governor of the state of New Mexico, Diane Dennish.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. It's so great to be home. You know, I grew up right here in Hobbs, New Mexico, where we have some distinct advantages. We grow up, we know our neighbors, we go to school with our friends, and in general, we thrive in these small community environments. And I want to welcome everybody from the surrounding region that are here today for this conference. I want to thank New Mexico Tech for their sponsorship of this conference on a critically important subject here in New Mexico. I know you heard from my friend Harry Teague, who was here, Congressman Teague, who was here earlier. He and I grew up. He likes to say he met me when we were in the when he was in the 5th grade, and I like to remind people I was much younger than that. Must have been. But I love small communities like Hobbs because I personally know the quality of life that we can find in a place like Hobbs and many of the surrounding communities. But the only way that people are going to be able to continue to live in these types of towns is if they continue to be able to find good-paying jobs. The jobs that the oil and gas industry and now the enrichment facility are providing in this community. But what we need to remember is all across America there are towns just like Hobbs, New Mexico. But Hobbs has differed a little bit because we have had these natural resources right here in one place. But like many good things, it's not always that simple when you have all those good things. For the people that are from the Permian Basin, the surrounding area, I don't have to tell you what it's like to live in the boom and bust times of the oil and gas. What that does is wreak havoc on your business plans, your business models, planning for the future. When I lived here in Hobbs growing up, we went through a couple of those, and it was always interesting. And when I left Hobbs and would come back here in the 80s, we could see what kind of consequences the busts have on communities like Hobbs. Now, $50 a barrel for oil sounds really high price compared to what it used to be years ago. I mean, I remember when we thought if it got to $26 a barrel, we were going to be in real high cotton. Today it's $50, which is about a third of what it was over a year ago. So that might be bad for our friends in the energy, in the oil and gas business, but it's also bad as we think about what you're talking about here, which is renewable energy. Because we know that the high market prices of oil and gas are what have made it possible to invest in renewable energy sources in this country, to explore and develop additional renewable energy sources. So this economic and credit crisis not only affects everybody economically, it certainly affects our ability to proceed in the renewable energy. But despite these current hardships, interest in developing a mature renewable energy economy remains very strong. And we know one thing, that we have to do it. It's important to do because it holds great promise for the country, for the world, and for this part of the, for New Mexico, because we've really got it all. I love to go around, and when I talk about workforce development in New Mexico, one of the number one growing energy businesses is the energy business, and it has to do with wind, solar, oil and gas, nuclear, and biomass, biodiesel. New Mexico has the best opportunity, I think, of almost any place in the nation. And while we know that the instability of market prices affect the energy industries, we still have to work for renewables to reach their full potential. The petroleum industry and the gas industry is mature. Renewables are in their infancy. And it's thanks to some of the people, the experts who are here with you today from New Mexico Tech, our senior senator, Jeff Bingaman, that are working hard to find a way to make renewable energy attractive to both energy and to consumers. To do it in a way that no matter what new traditional prices are doing, to make sure that we're creating policies that are fair and even-handed, but give us the opportunity to continue to develop that renewable energy source. Climate change is driving a lot of this. Recent reports tell us that climate change will cost New Mexico about $3.2 billion a year by the year 2020. So it's driving some of what's going on. The major components of these added climate costs are wildfires. We see them all the time in places where we never saw them before. Health-related costs and having impacts on recreation, tourism, whatever it might be. There's also a cost of inaction by not creating renewable energy sources. It might mean as much as $1.3 billion loss of income to our state if we miss the opportunities to implement renewable or energy efficient programs. And that number's only going to get bigger. So we need to work on it. And I know that the industry is up to the challenge. The folks in industry are up to the challenge. In New Mexico, we are in that very unusual position. We have lots of wind. Not all the time, maybe not quite enough, but we have a lot of wind. We have great potential for solar power, maybe not enough, and we have great geothermal potential. And if you don't think so, ask Dr. Dan over here, because he's looking for all those geothermal opportunities over at New Mexico Tech. The same can be said about biomass. But what we have is this fantastic mix of energy sources right here. And I just want to say, I know Dr. Dan has an introduction for Senator Bingaman, but I want to just say a couple of words about it, because one of the things that adds to our potential and our opportunity is leadership in the U.S. Senate, formerly by Senator Domenici and by Senator Bingaman, and now by Senator Bingaman as our senior senator, as our administration has worked to try to improve energy efficiencies, alternatives, create transmission authorities, do all the things that we need to do here at home, stateside. Senator Bingaman has been a great partner. He's not only made it possible to have opportunities, but he's been fair and even-handed. And when you hear all the talk about cap and trade, he didn't just jump on that bandwagon, but he said we got to make sure it works in a way that's fair to industry and that does what we need it to do. And most important in my mind, he understands what it means to link the jobs of the future to renewable energies and to energy production. My goal as Lieutenant Governor has been to create what I call the edge economy, a vibrant education system with a vibrant economy. And a vibrant education system is going to train young people and already adults for this vibrant economy of renewable and existing energy sources here in New Mexico. They can be and will be the highest paid jobs. And I want to thank Senator Bingaman not only for his work on this recent Recovery and Reinvestment Act that's going to invest in energy, for his leadership in the field of energy development, for his leadership in keeping kids in school and understanding that link between schools and job and workforce development and what needs to happen for the jobs of the future. I believe I can say safely that he and I agree on one thing. Whatever we do in our political lives has to think about the time way beyond incumbency. It has to think about what the state is going to look like in 10, 20, 30, or 40 years, not what it's going to look like tomorrow or the next day. And so it's an honor for us to have him here to share this podium, for you to hear from him, one of the premier policymakers in energy in New Mexico, and I wanted to say thank you to him. And lastly, but not least, I want to say thank you to all of you here in the Permian Basin, wherever you're from, for what you've done for this corner of the state. My home, I still consider Hobbs my home. It's been incredible to me to watch the progress over the last 20 years, how you've diversified your economy, how you continue to try to reach out and reach up and do better for this corner of the state. It's a great honor to claim Hobbs as my home. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Diane. On behalf of New Mexico Tech and the Center for Energy Policy, I want to add my welcome to all of you and tell you that it is with great pleasure that I am sharing in the introduction of our keynote speaker, the Honorable Senator Jeff Bingaman. Senator Bingaman, New Mexico's senior senator, is uniquely qualified to give an address at this timely conference about this important topic at a critical time in American history. He is, I am sure, pleased to discuss energy production, particularly the role of renewable resources and their importance with respect to the development of national policy. Senator Bingaman has established leadership in the U.S. Senate as an advocate of innovative technology to mitigate the impact of climate change. He recognizes the need for research, development, and demonstration in the development of clean energy technology. He understands the technology requirements to lowering greenhouse gases and that it should be deployed before and during the early stages of any system of cap and trade. Senator Bingaman has wisely linked low-carbon technology availability to reducing greenhouse gas emissions as a national policy objective. He is almost alone in understanding of how the two are interconnected. He understands, most importantly, that the current economic downturn calls for a reasonable and sensible government policy of support for renewable energy. The long-term benefits of his legislative leadership in the bottom line tax credit for clean energy manufacturing and solar production as a response to the market turbulence has a place in the history of renewable energy in New Mexico and indeed the nation. Senator Bingaman's call for new clean energy generation technology is a mandate for a technology research university that I represent. From geothermal to the smart transmission grid, we stand ready in research and advanced technology development to realize the Senator's vision in the national interest. Climate change is an issue of global significance. What Senator Bingaman does in the Senate of the United States should set an example to our nation with unsustainable carbon dioxide emissions. I am aware, and I hasten to add, that our unfortunate greenhouse gas emissions rival, China, since I had the pleasure of visiting there on a fact-finding mission just very recently. So this really is of global concern, and we all have to join hands in trying to deal with this difficult problem, because the need for energy is not going to go away in whatever manifestations. And now I present to you Senator Bingaman, the voice of reasonableness on renewable energy, greenhouse regulations, and above all, cost. He recognizes the need for balance between climate change and the requirements of technology for mitigating it. May I present to you Senator Jeff Bingaman.
Thank you very much. Dan, thank you very much for the extremely kind introduction. And Diane, it's wonderful to see you. Thank you for your kind words. It is an honor to be here, and I congratulate New Mexico Tech for sponsoring this annual conference again, and of course New Mexico Junior College for hosting it here on their campus. It is indeed an honor to have Diane Denish as our Lieutenant Governor, and I admire the leadership she provides on this subject, but on a great many subjects that affect us in New Mexico. I also wanted to mention Senator Carroll Lavelle. I know he's been a co-host of this and founder of this conference, and he does a great job for this part of the state and for all of the states. So thank you for your good work. I know Harry Teague spoke to you a little earlier. I wanted to just acknowledge what a pleasure it is to work with him in the U.S. House of Representatives, and he and I and the rest of us in the congressional delegation have had a lot of chance to interact, and he is, of course, doing an excellent job. I'll just briefly go over some of the same ground that Diane and President Lopez went over about all the things that we have contributed and are contributing today to meeting the country's energy needs. And I think they did a good job of summing it up. Obviously, both here in the Permian Basin and in the San Juan Basin, we provide substantial oil and gas to help fuel the nation's economic needs. In the process, the oil and gas revenues that are produced both here in this part of the state and in the northwest part of the state have been a tremendous boon to us in New Mexico with state government and local governments. Their budgets would not be what they are without the contributions of the oil and gas industry. And I'm persuaded that that industry will continue to be both a major player in our state's economy and in our nation's economy for a long time to come. Over the last few years, of course, it's been alluded to that southeast New Mexico has also become a major player in the nuclear power industry, and that's with the development of the National Enrichment Facility in Eunice. That facility is getting ready to produce enriched uranium for fuel rods bound to power our nation's nuclear power plants. As the topic of today's conference attests, there's a new green energy economy also growing up across New Mexico and throughout the entire Southwest, and it promises, in my view, to rival the other energy-related industries that we have benefited from. Beginning with the wind generation 100 miles north of here, Renewable energy has begun to take roots in all regions of our state. North central New Mexico is already the home for several solar energy manufacturers. And within the last few months, a number of new investments in manufacturing facilities have been announced. Biofuel projects have been funded, and several are under development in this region as well and in our state. Just last week, our state's first utility-scale solar electricity generating project was announced, and several others are on the verge of being announced in our state. Additionally, the state's geothermal resources are being looked at by New Mexico Tech, by New Mexico State, and by others for their potential development. The deployment of solar technologies to the residential market, to the commercial market is becoming a big employer. Distributed deployment of those technologies such as solar and ground-coupled heat pumps, geothermal heat pumps, are taking off, are creating jobs throughout our state. And then on the efficiency side, which includes making homes and other buildings more efficient through insulation, we have next-generation windows, appliances, and of course in Albuquerque we have a new cutting-edge insulation manufacturer, which is prospering greatly in the current environment. So the other great resource we have and that we brag about all the time is the research and development activity, energy-related research and development activity at our national laboratories and at our universities. And we need to continue to nurture that and support that in every way we can. With all the talk about green energy and green energy economy in Santa Fe and in Washington and here at this conference, I think it's worthwhile to ask about exactly what are we talking about? What are we trying to achieve in this area? And I tried to sort of boil that down to a few points. I think all of us, or most of us at least, could agree upon two goals. One is increasing energy security. Now that's a broad term, but to me it means lessening our dependence on foreign sources of energy, lessening our susceptibility to interruptions in energy supply, lessening the susceptibility of our economy to price fluctuations in energy. All of that I would put under the category of energy security. The other goal is the one that Diane mentioned and Dr. Lopez as well, reducing greenhouse gas emissions. And we all know that something over 90% of greenhouse gas emissions in this country are the byproduct of energy production and distribution and use. So it is integrally connected to our energy policy. If those are the two goals, how do we achieve those goals? I think it makes sense to do at least three things. First, to increase the efficiency with which we distribute and use energy, and that's sort of a no-brainer, one we've given too little attention to historically. I think we are substantially behind many industrial nations in the attention we've given to energy efficiency. Second, we need to diversify our sources of energy, and that's what this conference is all about, seeing how we can find other ways to produce energy in addition to the ways that we are currently producing energy. And third, how can we find ways to produce energy that do not result in additional greenhouse gas emissions? I think this is a rough description of what most people mean when they talk about going green or creating a green energy economy. I thought I'd just take a few minutes to talk about the role of government in trying to get us from where we are to where we would like to be on our energy policy, and not only what the role of government has been, but what I believe it can be going forward. In New Mexico, of course, Governor Richardson has taken a lead, and we've had a forward-looking legislature, and of course our Lieutenant Governor has been a leader on these issues. We have also had an activist, PRC, pushing in the correct direction here. And through the combined efforts of those public officials, we've created incentives and requirements that have made significant economic development investments to New Mexico in green businesses a priority. At the federal level, let me talk about three categories. First, what we have done prior to this year in our state legislature in recent years. Second, what we've done with the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act, or the stimulus package, which I think has been the subject of many of your discussions here. And third, where I think we're likely to go for the remainder of this Congress. And so let me briefly touch on each of those. In 2005, I worked, of course, Senator Domenici then chaired the Energy Committee. I worked with him, and we began a long-term effort to promote renewables as part of the energy legislation we passed in 2005 with the production tax credit applicable to wind energy, with the investment tax credit applicable to solar energy. We also took steps to increase domestic supply of oil and gas. We took various steps to promote additional nuclear power plant construction in this country, and I think some of those provisions that we were able to include in that 2005 bill have resulted in the filing of 17 applications with the Nuclear Regulatory Commission for new nuclear power plants, which is progress in that regard. That was 2005. In 2006, Congress opened more of the Gulf of Mexico to exploration and development. In 2007, we passed another major piece of legislation that had a lot of parts. It increased resources for the BLM and the Forest Service so that they could more efficiently process applications, manage inspections for oil and gas well development. It led to an unprecedented number of new production wells here in the West. We also stepped up efforts to incent the development and deployment of electricity generation fueled by renewables. We expanded the renewable fuel standard, which we had put in place in the 2005 bill, but we expanded it very substantially to promote more use of biofuels in the 2007 bill. We also increased requirements, fuel efficiency requirements on automobiles and trucks. This was the first time we had taken any action to change fuel efficiency requirements in over 30 years. So that was progress. In 2008, we did two things. We passed a farm bill that added major support to development of a biofuels industry. And we also, in 2008, after much difficulty, we finally passed expanded and extended tax incentives for solar energy, for wind, for biomass generation of electricity. That move, I think, sent a signal to the markets that we were serious in our efforts to promote renewables over the long term. Most market analysts expected that would be enough, that the extension of those tax provisions would be enough to ignite a rash of new investment in alternatives. But by the time we enacted those, the bottom had fallen out of the domestic economy, and renewable project developers, like many other businesses seeking investment capital, began to have great difficulty getting projects funded. And once again, industry came to Congress seeking help to ensure that there would be a sustained ramp-up of investment and deployment of renewable energy necessary to meet the goals that we discussed earlier. That brings us to a discussion of this American Recovery and Reinvestment Act, or the stimulus package. With the economy entering into a recession, and with Congress and the President together trying to find a way to stimulate economic activity, together we enacted a very major stimulus package, as I'm sure you're all aware. I think one of the best things about that exercise was that we made an enlightened decision to spend some of that money on transformational investments. The key investments for today's topic, of course, the key part of that for today's conference is the $60 billion investment through the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act in renewable energy and energy efficiency and carbon capture and sequestration. Some of the highlights of that bill: we extended to 2012 the Renewable Energy Production Tax Credit. We put in place a mechanism at the Department of Treasury to allow developers to monetize the production tax credit for electricity production from solar and from wind. We put in place new loan guarantees for renewable energy projects. Energy efficiency block grants were provided to states and to municipalities to the tune of $6.3 billion. There was an extension and expansion of energy efficiency tax incentives. There was support for the manufacturing of advanced energy projects or products in our economy. I think we're all aware that as we see this transition of our economy to a green energy economy, too much of what we are buying by way of new technology we are importing, and we need to have our own domestic manufacturers of those technologies. So we put in place the first investment tax credit for manufacturing of green energy technology, which we hope will pay big dividends for the country. We provided funding for state energy programs, but we conditioned that funding on states making progress on electricity rate reform so that we could get more attention to energy efficiency through the rate-making process. Additionally, we made some major additional commitments to research and development by funding the Advanced Research Projects Agency for Energy, ARPA-E, which we had previously legislated into place and had not funded before. We put in funding for the Energy Frontier Research Centers through the Department of Energy, and we put $1.2 billion for research infrastructure at our nation's Department of Energy national laboratories. So that's a summary of what's happened from 2005 through the current time. For the rest of this Congress, we have a great opportunity, I think, to make even more progress. We have legislation under development in our Energy Committee in the Senate, which we think will make a significant contribution to meeting our energy needs. It concentrates on improving energy efficiency once again in the building sector. The federal government has done very little, frankly, to promote more energy efficiency in building construction, whether commercial building construction or residential building construction. We're trying to correct that. We're trying to streamline the process by which we update appliance efficiency standards. We've got a whole raft of appliance efficiency standards that we've adopted nationally, but we don't have a good system for updating those on a regular basis as technology improves. And some of our competitors nationwide or worldwide do a much better job of updating their standards, and accordingly they have captured a much larger portion of the world market for renewable energy technologies. We're also concentrating in this legislation that we're developing on deploying of clean energy technologies at scale for greater energy production. We're doing that through, we hope we can adopt at the federal level finally a renewable electricity standard or a renewable portfolio standard. We have one in New Mexico. The one we would try to adopt at the federal level would probably not be as aggressive as what we've done in New Mexico, but it would be a major step forward in helping to create a market for renewable energy products that has not been there up until now. We are trying to strengthen the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission's authority with regard to siting of transmission lines. I think we're all very aware that you can have all the renewable energy production capability in the world. If you can't get it to market, if you can't get it to where it's needed, you're not getting the job done. So clearly that's a priority for us. We're trying to improve the federal government's efforts to finance or assist with the financing of clean energy commercialization. As some of you may know, we passed, as part of the 2005 legislation, a loan guarantee program that was operated out of the Department of Energy. It has not worked as we had hoped it would. And we are trying to make changes in the law and expand the ability of the federal government to assist with loan guarantees and other financial support for deployment of clean energy technology. We're also doing a lot to broaden the reauthorization of energy research and development, expand energy workforce, training opportunities, and a whole range of other items. Our approach to developing this energy bill in our Energy and Natural Resources Committee in the Senate is to do so on a bipartisan basis. I'm working with Lisa Murkowski, who is the ranking Republican on our committee, and she is very cooperative and very anxious to help with development of a forward-looking energy bill. So I'm optimistic that in the next few weeks we can complete committee action on such a bill. We can report it to the full Senate, and then we will have an interesting discussion and debate about how that is packaged for purposes of consideration in the Senate. There are sort of two pieces of the puzzle that we're trying to get done. One is energy-related legislation along the lines I've described, and the other is cap-and-trade legislation to deal directly with greenhouse gas emissions. In the House of Representatives, Chairman Waxman, he and Congressman Markey have put together a bill that they are promoting that does both in one package. And that legislation, I think, is clearly a very serious effort by them to deal with a wide range of these issues. In the Senate, we are not as far along in the development of cap-and-trade legislation. And of course, in our Energy Committee, we do not have jurisdiction to be proposing legislation establishing a cap-and-trade system, and I do not intend for us to do that as part of our energy bill. But it'll be up to the majority leader in the Senate as to whether he tries to bring a combined package of legislation to the floor, or whether he goes with an energy bill freestanding. I don't know how he'll come out on that decision. I personally strongly support the enactment of both. I believe we should pass energy legislation along the lines I've described. I think we should also pass cap-and-trade legislation in this Congress in order to put a price on carbon dioxide emissions and greenhouse gas emissions more generally. I think the time has come to begin that process. The Europeans are way ahead of us in trying to deal with this. The northeastern states, through the RGGI effort, are way ahead of the federal government in trying to deal with this. California is moving ahead, along with western states, including our own, to develop a cap-and-trade system. I think that we would be much better served with a national cap-and-trade system rather than a series of patchwork cap-and-trade systems that industry is having to try to comply with all around the country. So I hope we can get on and do all of that. But my main message is that renewables are here to stay. They will be, in my view at least, an increasingly important part of our energy supply. They are not going to be a replacement for a lot of what we currently have in place, but they are going to be an add-on, and they are going to help us diversify our sources of energy. And by doing so, they're going to increase our energy security, and they're going to help us to deal with the very real problem of greenhouse gas emissions. My job, as I see it, is to do all I can to move the country forward on these issues, but also to ensure that New Mexico remains at the forefront of this renewable energy development, as it has been on the forefront of the other energy sources that we so heavily depend upon. So I pledge my best efforts to keep pushing New Mexico forward and the country as well. And again, I congratulate those of you involved with this conference. I know this is the second year that this has occurred, and to me it's a very good sign that you can have a conference this well attended on renewable energy right here in the heart of the Permian Basin, where I know that that in the past the dependence on oil and gas has been great, and today the dependence on oil and gas is great, but I think this is a sign that people are looking ahead and recognizing that there are new opportunities that need to be pursued as well as maintaining what we have. So thank you again for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be at your conference.
Thank you very much. I think the senator has time for 2 or 3 questions. Van is collecting them. They were supposed to write them on those cards at your table, but if you haven't done that, maybe we can have an oral question from the floor and kind of expedite things. Go ahead.
Well, no, I think, could all of you hear the question? I think some of them over here couldn't. Let me repeat it. She asked if there's been any serious consideration of a flat carbon tax rather than a cap and trade system as an alternative way to try to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and pointing out that it's simpler, it avoids having to build a new bureaucracy and all the rest. There are advantages to having a carbon tax, but frankly, I don't know if it's politically passable. There's not a lot of enthusiasm in Washington for any kind of tax, and this would be any kind of tax. So I'm not that optimistic that Congress could be persuaded to enact a tax of that type. It also, according to some, it does not have the advantages of cap and trade in that it is a fairly blunt instrument. It does not allow emitters to go ahead and continue with emissions and buy credits from others as a cap and trade system would, rather than just pay a flat tax. So that's one other disadvantage. The third disadvantage to a flat tax, at least in the discussions that I've heard, is that the hope is that at some point we have Europe that has adopted a cap and trade system. The Australians have announced that they are planning to adopt one later this year, I believe. That's their plan. There are cap and trade systems starting up in this country that I alluded to, and the thought is that at some point we could have an internationally linked system so that that would be possible to have a world price for carbon dioxide emissions similar to what you have for a lot of other commodities, and that would not be anything that was achievable through a tax. Yes?
Bingaman, Ricky out here on behalf of the Pickens Plan. And first of all, I'd like to thank you on behalf of the more than 1.6 million members of the Pickens Plan, which about 2,000 live in Mexico. For all you do on all the energy, not just alternative, not just me. A few things you might comment on. Understanding that proposed a bill called the Renewable Electricity Standard. A second bill legislation proposed would enable new transmission lines to deliver wind and solar energy into the grid. And finally, the third thing, and you may or may not be familiar with this one, that's floating around the House, it's H.R. 1835, the natural gas tax, which would require government to begin replacing their vehicles with natural gas-powered vehicles. That's part of it. And the other part of that plan is the infrastructure for natural gas refueling stations all across the country.
Okay, let me give you... let me give you a short answer to each of the four that you mentioned. First, on the renewable electricity standard, I did refer to that. We do have a proposal there to try to adopt at the federal level a renewable electricity standard or a requirement on utilities to produce a percentage of the power that they sell from renewable sources, and we hope we're able to move ahead with that. There's controversy about it. There always has been, but we're hoping we can move ahead with that. On the issue of transmission siting, I did mention there that I also have circulated a proposal which I hope we can get adopted to give more authority to the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission to make decisions on siting. I'm persuaded that you can't get to a national grid, you can't get to a smart grid, you can't get to what we need to have if we don't have more authority in the hands of someone to make decisions. It can't. I mean, that's the unfortunate reality we're faced with. Now, on the natural gas bill that you referred to in the House, I know Congressman Boren from Oklahoma has introduced that along with some others. We're looking at that. I'm generally favorably disposed to the idea of trying to see if the federal government can't do a better job of using natural gas to fuel the government fleets of vehicles, which are very substantial. And I think that makes sense. Frankly, I think use of natural gas in transportation makes the most sense when you are talking about fleets of vehicles, where they're going from, they're parked at the same place every night. They go out in the morning, they come back at night, and we've got that with many state, local, federal government agencies, and we ought to try to use natural gas in those areas wherever we can.
Thank you, Senator. And I'm sorry he's run out of time, and we have a couple of things. We have a presentation for you, the Lieutenant Governor, if she would come up. But with that, Senator, advanced people have a way of cutting us short, even when we would like to stay a little longer. We have a little memento, and it's of de minimis value, so the Senator won't go to jail over this. And the reason we'd like to present it to the Senator and one to the Lieutenant Governor, if she comes up, is that Senator Lavelle and Johnny Cope and your mayor and some others went to New Mexico Tech some years ago and proposed this energy conference, this energy research group to be established here in Hobbs. I think it was a great idea. This picture of Brown Hall at New Mexico Tech simply symbolizes that visit and the initiation of an idea that's come to fruition in these two really great conferences.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
And with that, a great round of applause, and much stronger than that, for both the Lieutenant Governor and Senator Bingaman.